Hey, Pervis, how are you?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Okay, before we jump in, I'm gonna have you start. I'm gonna have you introduce yourself, starting with your pronouns, and tell us
Okay.
whatever you want us to know. Whatever you want us to know.
Okay. So he, him, his,
Amazing.
and what do I want you guys to know? I'm a great masterful life coach. I'm
Mm,
the I'm the best, actually. Uh,
yes.
no, I'm Pervis Taylor the third, award-winning celebrity life coach, speaker, and author of the book Survival Mode, a book that teaches men of color how to process and navigate through their emotions and mental health. Besides that, I'm an entertainment aficionado. I love entertainment. I actually started out in entertainment. I worked at Def Jam Recordings, and I
Go
was signed to
girl.
Wilhelmina Models at one point. Yeah, so like I have a
Yes.
background in entertainment. Yeah, so yeah, that's what I want to know. I'm a cool brother from the South, country boy.
What part
So
of the South?
yeah, I am from Dallas, Texas. Actually, Lancaster, Texas.
Okay, cool. I've never. No, I've been to Austin, Texas, but I went to high school in Rome, Georgia. I'm from New York.
Rome.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
okay.
Rome, Georgia. Yes, say it
What
just
part of
like
New York
that.
you from?
I'm from Queens originally, a literal 5 minute drive from LaGuardia Airport, East Elmhurst.
Oh, okay, got you, got you. I'm in Brooklyn.
Okay, cool. What part of Brooklyn? Wait, don't tell
I
us. Don't give your whole government. That's where you live.
got listen. It's bad. You know what's crazy? I've done that before in an interview and somebody found me. So I'm
Yeah,
happy that
yeah,
you
yeah.
said that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Don't do
yeah,
that. I'm
yeah,
learning.
yeah.
I'm
I
learning
was
the
worried
hard
about
way
to be like,
myself. Yes, because we're like, oh,
I'm
share
so
the
open.
information.
Yeah, I'm open. I share information. So yeah, I
Yes,
gotta I
but
gotta
then
recognize I can't do that.
the wrong person will find you. We don't want that. Okay.
Right.
So I'm gonna ask you the little black folks question, which is
Oh Lord.
Judith came up with this one, but I love it because I just watched I don't know when this will come out, but I just watched the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reunion, which
Oh,
I highly recommend for everyone. It's on HBO Max. And I recommend it because, and this is actually great for you because of your line of work. Um, they bring in the original Aunt Viv, Janet Hubert,
hmm.
and she and Will have a very uncomfortable, raw, honest, healing conversation for the
Hmm.
first time in 27 years. The show is 30 years old, and she left after, or was released after season 3. So they haven't seen each other. Um, and it was just really beautiful to like watch two grown folk
Yeah.
figure it out, you know? Like,
And it was really beautiful to see a man take accountability for how he showed up in the space.
mm,
And so
yes,
for me, that was, in thinking about it, I was telling people, I said it's difficult when you're talented and you're an artist, right? Because you're an artist,
yes,
Brandon, you're an artist. And so can you imagine, for whatever reason, you lose a gig and the person who kind of took part in you losing the gig, their life flourishes and
yes,
you lose everything
yes.
and you're dealing with drama at home and you really don't have an escapism. I'm not for bitterness, but I can understand how bitterness settled in.
Of
You know what I
course.
mean?
Yeah.
And
And the
so
age thing
yeah,
too. Will was
yes,
21. Janet was a grown ass woman with a baby and married,
exactly.
you know? Yeah, it was just really it was a we were watching it on the couch weeping because I was just like really moved by the
Yeah,
forgiveness that took place.
yeah,
And you could
absolutely.
tell, I mean, by the time this comes out, if you haven't watched it, whoever's listening, then you're late. But Will apologizes, and if you watch the body language, it's like I could see it's literally what Janet needed. Like
Absolutely.
she
You
needed.
saw her, you saw her become
Ah,
disarmed. You saw her
yes,
kind of settle and relax and come into her
yes.
space. It was beautiful.
And she got to say what she needed to say, and then okay, that anyway. So the question is,
Sorry. Sorry.
this is what happens on this show. Like I like
Yeah.
start. It's fine. So the little black folks question is: which celebrity, black celebrity, would you want to be your auntie or uncle?
That's a good question. I will probably Jennifer Lewis.
Ah, that is a great fucking answer. Of course,
Yeah,
Jennifer 1N Lewis. Yes. Tell me
yeah,
why. Tell
yeah.
me why Jennifer Lewis for you.
Like I've been in her space before, and she's just funny. I just like sitting there. I'm just like, yo, you're just a ball of energy, and
Hmm.
it's like it's the same off camera as it is on camera.
I believe
And
it.
so I was just like, yo, she's just full of life, and I like that she's very honest about where she's been in her life and on her journey. And so
Yes.
she's the first person that came to mind. I was like, if I ever was in acting again, I was like, she has to be my mom or
Yes.
auntie or something.
Or
Yeah.
something. I saw her performance at the LA LGBT Center, and I swear it's her one woman show, and I think it was like 2 hours. And honestly, I would have sat there for 3 more hours. It was brilliant. Like she is a powerhouse, and I think everybody wants her. Like I think everyone you're like that. I want her in my family. Like when
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Thanksgiving
yeah.
happens, when Christmas happens, I want Auntie Jennifer at the table. Let me
And
think about. Good.
uncle, I would say Will.
Okay, Will Smith.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good uncle. Why Will
yeah.
Smith for uncle?
What I've never had, like, I'm not really into, like, it's weird. I'm not into male singers. I'm not really into male actors.
Hmm.
It's weird. But Will, I've always found him to be charming and charismatic. And so I was like, he kind of would fit in with my family. And I feel like he would be that one fun uncle who you tell everything to, and he keeps it a
Yes,
secret. And he's the uncle that'll bail you out of jail and don't tell your mama. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like he would be that
absolutely.
guy.
I love that.
Not to say that I ever be in jail, but you know what I mean.
No,
You
we
gotta
know what
at
you
least know.
mean.
Yeah.
You know what you mean. My okay, I'm gonna start with my uncle because that came right away to mind. And mine, I think, in this moment would be Billy Porter, because I would
Mm,
love an uncle who would be able to allow me to defy what we think masculinity should be or is, and is just
mhm.
like comfortable in his skin and in his body and in his clothes. And I just feel like he would make great drinks and like great cocktail, like teach you about how to make a good, Manhattan, and sit at the piano and sing you a song. I just feel like it would always be a good town and like a good time in like his like Upper West Side townhouse. I'm making up that he has an Upper West Side townhouse, but in my fantasy, he does.
That's where he lives.
That
Got you.
in my fantasy. And for my auntie, that's a really good question. I mean, I think everyone knows that I'm going to say Auntie Oprah, because that's
TT Oprah. That's
TT
TT, not
Oprah.
Auntie.
You're right,
Yeah.
TT Oprah. I think I've said this on the show already. Yeah, I would want Oprah to be my auntie. I recognize that she doesn't want, to have a son or a daughter or a child. So I would just be happy to be just related in that auntie. What do we? I don't know what we call. I'm non-binary, so I
Mhm.
don't go by nephew or niece, and I forget what I would call myself in that familial term.
Yeah, what I'm sure she would find a term.
She find a
I'm sure
term.
she would find a
Her
term.
her baby Brandon. That's fine for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'll be her
She
baby.
like baby Brandon. Baby Brandon.
Judith
That
says she would
works.
call you child, and I'm happy with that. Her child.
She would call you the child, and we would know exactly who she's talking about.
We know exactly. Whenever, if y'all ever hear Oprah say the child came over, y'all know she's talking about BKG.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you the big black folks question, which
Yes, sir.
is usually when I ask these questions, it's not pointed at the guest and their background, but because of your background in mental health and because of what we're going through in the world, and I think it's so important to talk about this question is going to reflect that. So
Mhm.
my question is, when was the first time you knew that your experience as a black person affected your mental health?
Wow.
I know these big
That's
questions.
a
It's a big
big
question.
black question.
Take your
That's a big
time.
wow. I'm trying to think about when. Okay, can I answer that question? I'm gonna answer that
Oh
question
yes,
honestly.
please, always.
Um, I'm a little bit different than most people. I've always, and not saying people don't look at it this way. I've never looked at my black as me being black as less than. I always looked at it as privileged and
Mm,
powerful. So I've never conflated my mental health to my blackness. even though I know it shows up for other people as such.
Yeah.
So like I've always been a person. Like I had to fight to get into the gifted and talented program. I've always had to fight. So like when I think about, I never think about my blackness. Like I'm just, it just is what it is. Like it's like it's an honor to be black.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. And so I've never conflated that to my mental health, even though I've worked with people, my clientele and people that I've worked with, they do conflate the two. So I would be honest to say, like, I look at myself as a human being
Mm,
who has issues or who may have struggled with depression, but I never connected it to me being black.
mm. Have you ever I love
I hope I hope I hope you guys get what I'm saying. Yeah,
I totally get what you're saying. I think that,
yeah.
in the kind of global conversation about blackness and mental health, I have personally had in my own journey struggles. Now I'm with you. Like, I honor my blackness. I'm empowered by it. It's everything. I love it. But I can definitely be honest and say, in my history and in my journey, there were times where um, when I started to notice it, which was probably around puberty, when I started to notice that I
Hmm.
was being treated differently, a resentment definitely started to build. And I started to notice that the ways that I was being treated was impacting my mental health. And that's what I was tying to my blackness. But that was probably teenage years, and I had to overcome that. So I guess my question for you is, because I know that there are many people who have that experience, and then there are people like you who haven't. What do you think is the reason or the latchkey for you not having that experience? Is it a person? Is it where you grew up? Like, what happened in your journey?
I would say probably had to do with my parents.
Mm,
So my father was always like, no one's better than you. Excellence is the only way to do things, and how you show up matters. And so like with that being ingrained in my subconscious, like I think that's just how I showed up with everything. Now, have I encountered racism? Absolutely. But I always looked at myself as just like I'm a human being who may have struggled with anxiety or who may have had depression, and I linked that to experiences that I had within my human existence. So
mm,
in being molested, I didn't look at that as I was a black child who was molested. I looked at it was I experienced molestation.
mm.
You
Yes,
get what I'm saying?
I
So
do.
like I just I've always like I've never been intimidated by white people. I've always been like I'm dope and you'll catch up. Like you know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
so like my viewpoint about those experiences, I know it may sound a little odd given the space that we're living in, but I've never been ashamed of being black, and I never felt like I was less than because I was black. I've always felt empowered, and it's a privilege. And yeah,
And it is those things. So, what did you
yeah.
see? Um, Besides your father giving you those affirmations, did you also see it? Like, did you see blackness being empowered around you? Did you see blackness being like honored and revered around you as well?
Well, it's interesting because I grew up in a predominantly black town,
Ah, okay.
and yeah, so I think that also, I mean, it was mixed. We had white people and Mexicans and Asians as well. But my I guess like my enclave was all black,
Yeah.
and so in that regard, like that's kind of all I knew.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I wasn't,
Yeah.
even though I had white friends at school, but my world was black.
Yes.
You get what I'm
Yes.
saying?
Oh,
So
I
like,
1000% get that.
so it was always about, so like me getting straight A's wasn't a big deal in my household because that's what is
Was
supposed
expected,
to
and
be.
that's what you
That's what is
that's what
expected.
you
So like
yes.
me getting awards wasn't a big deal. That was just what was expected. You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
like, I did see it. I did see it as I became older. I would say like the lens of race started to like I started to see it more, but I just never, if I'm honest, I just never ever considered my blackness as a hindrance. I'm not saying that you're implying that at all, but
No, 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 yeah.
I just never looked at it as such.
Was your school predominantly black as well? Like your middle school,
Yes,
high school?
yes.
I think that makes, We were talking to Janelle James a couple weeks ago, who's a comedian, and she was born and raised in the Virgin Islands. And then she made a point, which is that, like, when I grew up around a lot of Black people. So when she moved to the States, she didn't have the same
Yeah.
bullshit. And I think that that
Yeah.
is in just these conversations, I think that is like a key difference. Like, if you are kind of raised in a Black neighborhood around Black people and you're just kind of witnessing Black excellence, you might not get the same conditioning that some of us, like myself personally, like I was in a lot of white spaces. I was in a lot.
Right.
I was like the only in a, or like one of
Yeah.
two. So I'm experiencing a lot of tokenism, and so I'm completely um, experiencing my Blackness different than somebody who's around a lot of Black people.
Right. And I also think about like just the things that my parents exposed me to. So I knew about like the Nicholas brothers, Sammy Davis Jr. Like they Marcus Garvey, like they ingrained in us like figures of Black excellence, Nat King Cole, James, like just people who were just world changers. And
Yeah.
so like we were inundated with that constantly. Like I mean, like even going to like nice restaurants, like I was all like we've always done that. We've always gone to 5-star restaurants. It was just the experience, and not saying my parents were poor, but it's just like they've always curated these experiences for us, for the children that we just I don't know. It's just kind of like we just show up and I think my sister and my brother, we're similar in that way. Like we were very proud of being Black, but I don't think we consider our Blackness when it comes to um, maybe our mental health issues or our struggles
Yes.
in life.
Do you think that your parents, maybe you've talked about this, intentionally curated your experiences in that way? Like, were they, or was that just how they lived? Like, were they intentional? Did they know that they were trying to prevent, like,
I think I think they were just winging it.
yes.
If I asked my mom, she said I had no idea what I was doing. But I think in their mind they were like, I want my children to have a better life than me. Because my mother
Mm,
grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, so she marched with Dr. King, so she knows all of that world. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like she knows it probably way better than me. But even she grew up in a privileged sense. Like she went to Catholic school, which was expensive back in the day. It was like private school.
Yeah.
And my mother went to Xavier University, so she went to a HBCU. So it's like her experience is kind of. I think it's. I don't know. I think it may be something in the in our gene pool, but I think we
Sure.
just show up in spaces. I mean, I definitely think she's had being a Black identifying woman. I definitely think she's had her experiences definitely from just me being Black, but I just she doesn't lead with that.
Yeah. Got you. I love that. Because I'm just thinking about, like, when I have kids, my husband is white, and so we
Mhm.
have a lot of conversations just about cross racially, and if our kids are mixed, and like, what, how do we want to raise them? But one of the things that's so important to me is that our kids who will probably and I'm going to fumble in here, and so I'm open to
It's okay.
being corrected by you or by our listeners.
Yeah.
But they will likely be perceived, that's not the right term, they will be Black, and they will be, even if they're mixed, we imagine that they will still move through the world as Black. So even though there will be a white side of them, if they're,
Mhm.
not to get too deep into it, but if we use my sperm and a white egg, like, so they will
Right. Right.
have a Black and white, but they will move through the world in Blackness. And so we're talking about just like, how do we empower them, and how do we make sure that they are, that they don't see it as a hindrance, because that was so much of my experience and so much of my unlearning. Um, and so I'm just curious about, like, are other people that conscious? I mean, it sounds like for your parents, it was kind of like we were winging it, doing it, but I am curious about, like, like my mother, I talk about this, had like a Black Last Supper, a photo, like we had a painting of a Black Last Supper, which I think was intentional.
Mhm.
Like, I think that was like an intentional choice to make sure that, like, Jesus in our house was Black and not
And the
white.
same thing in my house, and the same thing in my house. Like we had a
Yeah.
Black Jesus painting as well.
Yeah.
So I think you do the best that you can do, right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
and but you also prepare them. Like that's the one thing I will say my parents did prepare. I mean, obviously I wasn't oblivious, going into the world, I definitely know racism. I definitely know that there are certain things that I probably haven't had the opportunity to have because I am a Black man.
Yeah.
But my parents also taught me how to survive and they taught me how to thrive as well. And so I
Yes.
think when you teach your children both, I think you've done the best you can do.
Yeah, for sure. My mother always says everyone is doing the best that they can. And I think that's so that I
It's
live by
true.
that. Everyone is doing with whatever you got, everyone is doing the best that they can. So let me ask you this. So when you work with or when you like somebody like me, you hear somebody like me that conflates my blackness to my mental health, what is the conversation or what do you offer up in terms of getting over that? You know, for me, I've had taken years of therapy, but for you, if I were to come to you and be like, look, I really see that like blackness is impacting how I see myself or how I love myself or don't love myself. What do you
Mm.
say to that person?
Well, I definitely think, the one thing about life that's beautiful, sometimes it's not either or, it can be both and.
Mm,
And so while you may hold a space for that real reality that you are conflicted within your blackness, and but also there's a space that you can hold for beauty, right? And
mm,
honor which one that shows up at any given time. I always say this to my clients, life happens to us, but life also happens from us. And so
oof,
I think it's about you understanding that you also are co-creator in the life that you
mm,
want to have. And so when you understand that, you can focus on like, yes, we are being marginalized as people. Yes, it's injustice. Yes, there are disparities in us being Black people. But guess what? There's also beauty. There's also power. There's also history makers. There's also changing the world. There's also Black people showing up in spaces that we never occupied before. There's also legacy. There's also it's so many things on both sides, so both can be true. And
yeah,
so my thing would say, like, honor this when it shows up, but also honor this. So I'm
yeah,
not taking that away. I'm not taking that away and I'm not minimizing it. But I'm infusing and injecting something else that's also true.
yeah,
And so learn to honor this as well. And I think once you learn to honor both and you don't feel victimized and you feel victorious,
mm,
then you start to look at this thing a little bit different. You look at the marginalization, the disparities, you look at it a little bit differently because
yeah,
you're empowered because you also know that life is happening from you. And so that's a beautiful thing to know that something can come from you, that there's power, there's virtue coming from you. And so, like, I always want to make sure that I never leave my clients in a state where they feel completely victimized.
mm. I love that. You know what you were talking about that, you know, acknowledging that there is truth to the reality of being marginalized and the oppression and how that impacts. But I think what came up for me when you said there's also this beauty, because I talk about this online a lot as well, like, you know, black joy, in addition to everything that we need to dismantle, let's also
Mm-hmm.
find honor black joy and black love and loving ourselves and there's I almost wept at this. Somebody sent me like a super cut of just like black people laughing, and it was the most beautiful thing to. It
Yes.
was like a minute long clip of just like black people cackling, and it was victorious, to use your word.
Because there's nothing like that, because there's nothing like
There's
it.
nothing like that. Black people
There's nothing
laughing,
like it.
like making
Yeah,
a black person
nothing like
laugh
it.
is the highest honor.
It it is. It really is. It really is.
Yes.
I'm talking about, like, if you can get me crying,
Uh,
like, you won.
You
Like,
win. You win.
you win. Yeah.
Yes. So just thinking about, oh, I in my journey, I do now, but like I never thought about looking for black joy and black beauty. Like I admittedly, and I'm embarrassed to say this, read The Bluest Eye for the first time this year.
Mm.
It never came up. And I savored it because I was just enjoying the brilliance of Toni Morrison that I had not gotten
Yeah.
to experience before. It just was never something I looked for. It wasn't presented to me. It was, you know, in school we read The Great Gatsby, we read Old Man and
Right.
the Sea.
And
Um,
and also that's another thing too. I have to say this about you, just reminded me of something. Even in high school and junior high, we read Toni Morrison. We read The Bluest Eye.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like we read Terry McMillan. We read, you know what I mean? Like our
That was
teachers,
missing for
it's
me.
crazy. It's crazy. Even though I look at Langston, Texas, like sometimes I was like, our teachers were really progressive. For us to
Mm.
be able to, because we had to read from a Spanish author, an Asian author. We had to read the Joy Luck Club.
Wow.
We read the Joy Luck Club. We read The House on Mango Street. We read The Bluest Eye. So we had to read from various cultures
Wow. So there was a
and
value
even native
there.
traditions. Yeah,
I did not have that. Most of the authors I was reading was white, and if somebody gave you something black, it was like Fences, which nothing wrong with August Wilson, fucking brilliant. But you're just like,
right,
that's it. Like they're like it's like they only threw out periodically one or two of like the most pivotal, what we hold as black literature, but then nothing
right,
else, like, and you're
right.
like, if you don't see yourself in that one thing, you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm
And
fucked.
I even think we read Baldwin too.
Oh
Like
wow.
I think we even read some Baldwin. Yeah. Like I'm thinking about I'm like, yo, our school was actually kind of
Your
progressive in
school sounds
comparison to other
amazing.
schools. Yeah.
My school was
And
not.
especially back in the day, especially 1998, back in the day. So
Yes,
yeah.
which I think, in talking to you, and it's kind of the first time I'm putting all these pieces together. It's like, oh yeah, there is that's a value. The like the importance of our education system valuing authors from different cultures is wildly important because I've always thought in education, like, okay, well, you read The Great Gatsby, that's what we do. You read that book, that's what we do. But not thinking about the damage it does when a Black student or an Indigenous student or a Latinx student is in a room and they're just not seeing themselves.
Connecting and they're not
They're not
connecting. Yeah.
connecting. And then it's like something wrong with you because you don't understand rich white people. You're like, what? Um,
Right.
yeah. So just the importance of in my adulthood, like finding that black beauty
Yeah.
and in the midst of all the oppression and the things that we're trying to break down, it has become so vital for me to find black beauty. I talk about this all the time. Like I watch Living Single like every night because I'm like,
That's so
black
crazy, bro. I
excellence.
mean, I literally just binge watched on Hulu Living
Yes.
Single.
Yes, of course. That's where it is. I'm like, I keep
Yo,
rewatching. It's and it like it still has me cackling but it's so soothing right now because I used to watch obviously growing up, but to watch it now, especially this past summer watching it, has been
you
such
get all the
self-care.
jokes now. You get
Oh, I
all the
get all
jokes
the
now because
jokes
you're a
because
grown
I'm
up now.
grown.
Yeah, because you grown and yeah, no, and it was actually just a really really great show. I actually had the
Hmm.
opportunity to talk to Kim Coles. We were speaking at a conference together, and I told her, I said, I hope you understand how important that show was just for blacks,
Really.
right? Because that really, because I think I'll say this. I'll never forget one time I saw The Best Man Holiday, right? And
I
we
watch
were
it every year. I watch it every year.
so we were at a screening of it, right? And it was some white people there, and they were and I didn't attack them because I understood that they were really speaking out of their naivete, right?
Hmm.
For me, at least the way I was taking it, they were just bewildered at the black experience that they were watching. And I said to them, I said, honestly, that is more my experience than Boys in the Hood is.
Mm,
And they were
fair.
shocked. I was like, I have friends who are doctors. Like
Yeah.
I have friends who are lawyers. I have friends who are hugely successful. Like I mean, both narratives are true, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I think sometimes people don't understand that we're not a monolith, right? And and
That's the
so
point of
it
this show. Thank you. Say it again. We
right, and
are not a monolith.
we're not a monolith. So it's like I just think like shows like Living Single, it showed an aspect of black women, and it was ahead of its time. Khadijah had her own magazine, like, and that
Yes.
was around the same time. Like, it was just crazy. Like the
Kyle was a
synchronization.
stockbroker.
Kyle was
Max
a
was a
stockbroker.
lawyer.
Max was a lawyer. Like
Yes.
Sinclair wanted to be. Sinclair was an actress, and Overton was happy being
A
a fixer,
handyman.
a
Yes.
handyman.
And Regine was just a fabulous stylist. She
She
was a
was
stylist at
just
one point, but yes.
right, but I'm just saying, like, I just thought that was just so beautiful to show the different colors of who we are as a
Yes.
people.
I think so often, and there's nothing wrong with this, but this is what gets wrong with it. I think my experience is that white people, and I'll never forget my first like my first week at my boarding school in Georgia, I got asked, "Do you play on a basketball court like the one in Finding Forrester?" And that question stays with me to this day. I'm still shook because you're like, "Oh, that's what you want from me." Like you there's nothing wrong with that, but what you want is you want me to be Boys in the Hood, or you want me to be this rough edge, whatever that version of it is. And
And it's
there's
their ignorance. And it's
yeah.
the ignorance. And it's the ignorance is what they're exposed to. You know, I never forget Tyler Perry said this one time. He said, white writers write from their experience or how they experience the world. He writes
Hmm.
from his experience and how he sees the world. And so I think part of that, what they were saying is, I mean, I've definitely spoken at a private school or a boarding school, and I've had the white teachers ask me, you know, what are my qualifications of me being there, and I was like, the fact the school hired me.
Stop it. Oh my God.
You know what I mean? So it's like,
uh,
so it wasn't affirmative action. It's the fact that the school hired me because I'm good at what I do. And
yes.
listen, people think to their level of exposure, and that's just the reality, right? Because there are people in my family who have never left Texas,
Mm,
and so their worldview is framed around what they're exposed to.
right.
Your worldview is different. You're an actor, you're an artist, you're in a whole different sphere of commerce that most people aren't. So you see things differently than other people. So like I try to find a little bit of grace. I mean, I'm happy
Sure.
that you did check them. I have, you know, they need to be, they need
They
to
need to
have
be
a little
checked.
check.
Yes.
They need to be checked. But I also understand it. Like there are people who live to the stereotypes.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about that. It's the truth. There are people who live to certain things, and but it's but to me, it's like I never classify people based off of off of one experience with somebody.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Sure.
if I would have, I wouldn't have a job
Yeah.
if I were to do that. If I would look at every white woman as like, oh, you think I'm not qualified or able to be here? You see what I'm saying?
I
Like,
see what you're saying. Yes.
but it's like I think the thing is that they're so privileged that they can live like that.
Hmm.
We're not
We
in a
have to be
privileged
well
position. We have
versed.
to be well versed, and
Yes. That's the
that's when I
problem.
think about blackness when those type of experiences happen. Right? They have the privilege of being ignorant and dumb.
Yes. And we
You
do
know what I
not.
mean?
That's our
And
life.
we
If
do
I don't,
not.
yes.
Right. And we do not. So you have to learn how at the boarding school, learn how to be you, but also know how to show up in a way that still kind of honors you, but really is not a reflection of who you really, really are. But you know that you need to do that in order to get by. And so
Yes.
like but that also works to our benefit
Mm. Tell me how.
because we know how to navigate in multiple spaces.
Yes. You're
So
building
like
a muscle. You're
I'm
building
building
that.
a muscle.
Yeah.
I'm building a muscle. So I've been in, bro. Let me say something. And I'm saying, bro, I say it out of not
Yes.
to disrespect you.
No, no, no. You're
Um,
fine.
um, I was hired to do a professional development training for a company in DC, Southeast DC. And if you know about DC, Southeast is like hood.
Mm.
And I showed up in that space being me. I'm not hood. But I do have family from the hood, and I have friends. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but in me knowing how to navigate in multiple spaces, bro. At the end of that session, those men in that room were crying. I'm talking about these are dudes who, if they weren't working there, they would be on the block, hugging
Yeah.
the block.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's the benefit of it because I know how to show up and it's not that I'm showing up as purpose, but I know how to navigate through certain spaces. That's something that they don't have.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about a lot of stuff. You said a lot of really, really great stuff. Um, I'm thinking about that because it keeps coming back to like what I've been talking about. I think maybe every episode, which is the mental aerobics and of being black. And I'm just wondering, if 14-year-old me
Ooh,
really honored me, or if 14-year-old did what he had to do to exist, like, because what you said, which is beautiful, it's like this idea that, like, you can be in this space and like honor yourself, but also know how to navigate. And I think I know I can do that now. Like I know at
Right.
33 that I can do that. But 14-year-old me, I don't know if I knew how to do that quite yet. And I would say that oof, I might have dishonored myself in some instances.
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too. But look, but we were 14.
Yes. Yes.
How
Babies.
can you, yeah, we're a baby. So how can give yourself grace, and I give myself grace. Because I
Yeah.
definitely know it. I mean, I think about my experience growing up at 14, people making fun of me, people calling me names, and I didn't honor myself. I didn't defend myself. I
Yeah.
didn't, you know what I mean? I caved in. I became inward. I became somebody who I didn't recognize, because
Hmm.
in order to just survive, just to get by. But I have grace and I have love for that person, that the purpose at 14 years old, because that's what I knew to do at that time.
Yeah.
And now I have more tools in my toolbox. Now
Hmm.
I can pick and choose which tools I want to use. And so for then, the toolbox I probably had was just a hammer. So that's
Yes.
what I used. I
Yeah.
used the hammer of becoming somebody else, or pretending, acting like I'm all good and just getting by. Until that didn't work anymore. Then I had to pick up something else. Then I had to find a screwdriver. I had to pick up something else if I was going to make it, if I was going to live. I had to
Yeah.
find other ways to cope that were healthy, and I had to recognize that I was valuable. I had to start loving myself and appreciating myself and understanding that I had worth. Right. So
Yes.
that was a tool in itself, learning to love myself and learning to embrace who I really am. Right. And so, like, once I got into that space, I started to look for tools because I understood I was valuable. But at that time, you don't
Oof.
think about that.
Right. How do you find, because this is a question I get a lot online, which this might be a two-parter, but how do you find grace for your 14-year-old self, or for your younger self, or for your past? How do you in the present moment find grace for your past?
Well, it's kind of like what we talked about initially when I was talking about my parents. Like, they were just winging it, right?
Mm,
You don't have a manual to live to be 14 years old. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, if you knew better, if you knew what you knew, if you know what you know now, and you knew that at 14, you'd be a super, you'd be
Yeah.
Superman, you'd be a superhero. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
um, but I mean, you just gotta, you have to look back. You always have to look back at your life with a lens of reconciliation. You always have to find a way to find forgiveness and tie up those things in it. Not necessarily saying in a beautiful bow, but tie it up.
Tie it up.
Because if yeah, tie it up, because if you don't, that starts to spill into your now, which affects your future.
Yes.
So, like, as we get older, we do have to close chapters. We can't
Mm,
leave. And you know this as an actor and as an artist. Whenever you open up a piece of literature, you open up a play, those characters are alive.
mm-hmm.
Every time we open it up, no matter if it was written 300 years ago, those characters are alive because we opened them up and we're giving them life by reading them.
Yeah.
Same thing with our lives. We Certain things we can't keep opening up those chapters. We have to find a space of reconciliation, even if it's just the acceptance of, I didn't know what I know now,
Yeah. When you know
and
better,
tie
you
that
do
bow up.
better.
When
Yeah.
you know better, you do better. Let me tie that up. So I don't have to close that part. You open it up for wisdom to share with other people, but you don't open it up
To berate
to
yourself,
to
to put
berate yourself,
yourself
to beat
down.
yourself down. No, you don't do that.
You know what I also think, besides you know better, you do better. I had a mentor, I think I've said that I don't know what I say on this show or other shows, but I said, she told me, if you were your own parent, what advice would you give to yourself? And the parent analogy has been really helpful, because when I think about 14-year-old me, there's no, if 14-year-old me was my child, there's no way that I would berate my 14-year-old self, or
Mm-hmm.
hold my 14-year-old self to the standards of 33-year-old me. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think there's something about having to, in your past, honor what the past was, uh, as you say, learn from it, whatever the wisdom is, but also recognize that's not who you are anymore, and kind of hold it sacred like your child, and forgive your, like, would you forgive your 14-year-old child for doing some dumb shit? Probably, because they're
Right.
14, as you said. You're 14, you
Yeah.
don't know. And so we have to, like, I think that might, maybe that's a helpful way for people to process, because I get this question all the time. People are always talking about, or always asking, how do I kind of forgive myself for the past or move on from this thing? And the other question I get, which I'm hoping you can help with, is
Mhm.
how do I honor myself in this moment now? People are always asking, how do I love myself, or how do I honor myself, or how do I, any variation of that question.
Yeah, I think honoring yourself is first begins with sitting with yourself and getting to know yourself, right?
Mm,
I think, how can you love something that you don't know?
mm, oof. How can you love something that you don't know? Oof.
And so it's like, it's about honoring yourself, is about spending time with yourself. That's why I said this, this season that we've been in has been, even though it's been crazy on one aspect, it's also been a beautiful thing, because I think people are discovering who they are and who they are not.
Hey,
And so,
yes.
like, I definitely think the space of sitting with yourself, understanding and knowing who you are, and learning to love that person, embracing all of who you are, and and looking at yourself from a lens of curiosity, not a lens of shame. And I think that's important too.
Say that
Um,
again. Purvis,
look,
dropping the gems. Say it again.
you have to look at yourself from a space of curiosity, not a space of shame.
Mm,
And you know what I
yes.
mean? Because it's about
Yes.
asking yourself, like, do I like the color red, or what do I like? Who am I? Why am I? Why do I like? So, for instance, for me, like, I love watching SpongeBob. Why do I like watching SpongeBob? But not asking from a place of shame or judgment, but just out of
Yeah.
curiosity. And so I think we begin to honor ourselves when we spend time and get to know ourselves. And once you understand and you get to know yourself, and you understand that that's who you are, and that's all you got is you,
Yeah.
you start to have an appreciation for it. And then you start to say, you know what? Because I understand and know who I am, and I know that I'm worthy. And that's another thing too. Like, we're all on a quest, I think, of like becoming validated by something or someone, right? We're
Yes.
valid the moment we come out the womb. And I think
Mm,
that's the beginning of self-love, is when you know that you were valid coming out the womb. And so, like, when you understand.
I'm having church. I'm so sorry. I'm having, I'm having church over here. Yes. Okay, keep going.
No, no, you get what I'm saying. So it's like we have to. So we're all on the quest of this validation, this worthiness journey, right?
Hmm.
And I think once we resolve that and we reconcile that we are valid, and that all people can do is affirm that we have worth, not give or sign worth, but they can affirm that we have worth, and just co-sign. So, like,
Yes.
I'm the best
Yes.
life coach. I'm the best life coach. You can affirm that within me, but you can't say that I'm valid. You can't provide validation for me just because you say so. If Oprah were to say, "Purvis, you're a great life coach," I already know that. We're in agreement. We're in agreement.
That's the key. Oh my God. That is so important, that you have to, because it's useless if you're waiting for somebody else to tell you. It'll never stick.
Because then you ascribe that, so they have power over you, and
Yes.
so your validation is predicated on them and not on
And
you.
not you. It'll never stick if you're waiting for somebody else to tell you. You have to affirm it for
You
yourself.
have to affirm it for yourself. So that's why this journey is an inside job. That's why happiness is an inside job. We
Yeah.
have to spend time. We have to spend time with ourselves. That's how we begin to honor ourselves. Can only honor what you know.
Yeah. Let me ask you, I'm not to like switch gears completely, but you've given us all this very free wisdom. But how did you become a life coach? How did you get into the realm of mental
The
health?
space.
Yeah, in the
Yeah.
space. Like how did that happen? Because you're obviously brilliant at it. So how did that come to be?
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Um, I think it's like, in Christendom we say anointings, right?
Hmm.
Anointings.
Yes.
I think my mother was anointed to be a life coach, and my father too. And so I just think it was just something that's just in our, like, even my sister, like, we all think like this.
Yeah.
So I think it's something. So I think first of all, God did it first, but the how it actually walked came about and became flesh was my father. One of the last conversations I had with him before he died of a heroin overdose, believe it or not,
Mm.
he prophesied this to me. He prophesied that I'd be doing the work that I'm doing today. And at that time, I had just signed to Wilhelmina. I was working at Def Jam, so I was like, "Daddy, I'm gonna be famous. I'm about to turn. I'm gonna be lit up in these clubs. I'm about to, you know what I mean? I'm about to hang out
Yeah.
with Paris Hilton.
You
We
had a
about to go
different
have some drinks."
plan.
Like, but then I didn't know that that was going to be one of the last conversations I had with my father. And so,
Mm.
in him passing, I went through a very, very deep depression, very, very deep, dark depression. And I had never experienced that before. And that's when all the things that I thought about in my life, like I had suppressed being molested, I had suppressed being bullied and made fun of, and all those things started to come to the surface. But also, when I said both and, right?
Mm.
While those things came to the surface, I also asked myself with curiosity, not just from the shame, what purpose, what do you want? What makes you happy? So in that space of depression, those years, I said, what is the thing that makes you happy? Like I've always been the person that people came to for advice, even in elementary. Like it's crazy. Like, in all
Yeah.
aspects of my life, people have always come to me to ask, like, I've always been the confidant, or they've always wanted to, get some advice, some wisdom, anything that I could offer. And so that's how it started to begin. It was just like, oh, I like that. I like being that person. And so, I study, you get certified and all of that stuff, and the rest is history. But that was really the beginning of it.
Yeah, I think it is what I want to say. Black people in this space is not abundant, and it is so important. Do you know? Like it's just so
Yeah.
it's so important to, even in this conversation, we've connected in a way, and I have a fabulous therapist who I love, and she's of color. But I just haven't been able, like this, like there's not much work that has to be done. And it's like, oh, this is why somebody would continue going to therapy or going to a life coach or going, pursuing their mental health, because you have somebody who understands your experience without you
Yeah.
having to
Yeah.
explain too much. And it's like, oh, this is why it's important for Black people to be in the life coaching and in the mental health space, because
Yeah.
Black people are suffering so greatly. Um, in our country and in the world, and there's not enough understanding. There's not
Yeah.
enough people to understand their experiences.
And it's not enough empathy. Like I
Yeah.
really I really think it's empathy. Like I actually did an article about for I forgot the magazine, but they asked me, what is missing in the world right now, and I said empathy, and then obviously compassion, which is
Mm.
like PhD. Empathy is like master's degree, compassion is
Yes.
PhD. I think I've said to white people before, I said, have you ever experienced injustice? Have you ever felt marginalized? Have you ever felt um, like you didn't matter? And obviously they can say yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, imagine feeling like that all the time
Mm.
and still having to show up
Huh. At the top of your game.
at the top of your game, and you already know that is not in your favor to that degree.
Mm.
Like it's in your favor, but not
Not to the degree it should be.
not to the degree that it should be.
Mm.
And so, like, that's the thing. It's like we refuse. We all know what it's like to be slighted, to be rejected. Everybody knows what that feels like.
Yeah.
But yet, we seem to forget that when it comes to relations, human relations, and how we show up in the world. And I think that's the thing I try to get people to tap into. Like, tap into those spaces, because that. Listen, have you ever seen that movie A Time to Kill?
I don't think so, no.
With Matthew McConaughey, Sandra Bullock. I hope, yes, they deserve to die. I hope they burn in hell. That Samuel L.
I've
Jackson. That,
never, yeah, I've never, I don't think I've ever
but you,
seen it.
but you know, but you know what I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah.
So, Cliff Notes: Samuel Jackson is on trial for killing the guys that raped his daughter,
Mm.
right? And obviously, it's a racist town, and so he may end up going to jail. The closing argument by Matthew McConaughey, who's his attorney, the jury's all white, the
Mm.
jury of his peers. of course.
Of
They're all white.
course. Hmm.
And so he has them close their eyes, and he describes the rape, and he describes, like, vividly and graphically what happened to this girl, right? This young lady. Then he says, imagine if she was white.
Mm,
He appealed to their empathy.
mm,
And that's when Samuel Jackson's character gets off. He doesn't go to jail because that one moment, right? The
mm.
empathy, the empathic moment. And so I definitely, that's the one thing I try to implore when I'm working in white spaces: empathy.
Yeah.
If you don't have the cultural intelligence, fine, but I need you to have a little bit of empathy.
Why? Which this might actually be a can of worms, and it might be from my other podcast, Do the Work, where we do that. But the w- do I ask this? Of course. Now I have to because I've stated it. Um, do you have any musings as to why whiteness? I'm not going to say specifically white people, but whiteness
Mhm.
lacks empathy. In my experience, and I'm not talking about opinion, from my experience, whiteness lacks empathy. That's what I've kind of come up against often.
I would agree with that assessment. I think about it like this. It's kind of like, I'm going to use an analogy.
Hmm.
Most So with black men, right? They say the two emotions that black men are most comfortable displaying are anger and indifference, right?
Mm,
And I think it's really for a lot of people, like not just black men. Um, Anger is very empowering, but
mhm.
really what's undergirding the anger is hurt,
Yeah,
right?
certainly.
Hurt, when we think about feeling hurt, and we feel about, if you were to choose to feel hurt or choose anger, most people would choose anger because it feels so empowering, right? I feel
Yes.
powerful. The same thing is with the whiteness and empathy. My whiteness makes me feel powerful. Why do I have to be empathetic?
Oh, oh, okay.
You get what I'm saying?
No,
Like,
I
why?
get.
Like,
Yeah, yeah. Doesn't excuse it. I want people
it doesn't
listening
it doesn't
to know that we're
it
not saying excuses, but I understand. I understand crystal clearly what that is. The trauma
yeah.
and the and trauma again maybe feels like I'm letting you off the hook, which is letting them off the hook, which is not that. But I understand the appeal.
It think
The
about think about this, right?
Mhm.
And obviously don't want to open a can of worms, but 55% of white women voted for Trump again, right? This
Yeah.
this last
Uh-huh.
thing. Women at large, we've had the Me Too movement,
Mhm.
right? Where women have been sexually assaulted, sexually accosted, underpaid, like all these things
Mhm.
happen to them, right?
Mhm.
Have happened to women, and yet they voted for a person who clearly
Is not
is a Me Too,
interested. Yes.
is not, who's
Oh,
clearly had his own Me Too, who's
yes.
had several Me Too
Yes.
experiences, and so that says to me, whiteness trumps my femininity, my feminine experience. So
Mm.
that shows you, even in me being a woman, where I at some point couldn't vote,
Yeah.
my whiteness trumps that. And so that shows you how empowering whiteness is.
Yes. And then we all know that
Whether we agree
power,
with it, whether,
or we
yeah,
agree with it or not, but we all know that
yeah,
power is a drug, and people
seductive.
love their
It's a
power. It's
drug.
something that we cling to, and that's what you feel. I mean, even in this election and the loss that Trump lost, right? You can feel
Yeah,
the people following clinging on
yeah.
to power, like what, afraid to lose it, and it's like, well, girl, sorry. Get out.
But you get what I'm saying though.
No, I get what you're
So like,
saying.
even in this space, and I guarantee you, 55% of those women, I guarantee you, there's a chunk of them who've been sexually assaulted or been sexually accosted or
Hmm.
mistreated or undervalued and underpaid, and yet
Yeah, still voted for the power, to keep the
they still
power.
voted for the
It makes
power.
it makes it makes them feel empowered as well. And so that's why dark, very dark. Very dark. Okay, I'm gonna ask you the last question. Um, we've talked so much about family and empathy and mental health and all the things we've covered. But what just struck me is you talking about the last conversation with your father. And so I
Mhm,
wanted to ask, if you could have another conversation with your father,
mhm.
what would you say? Or what would it be about?
Oh my gosh, it wouldn't even. It would just be just talking about nothing.
Mm,
Like I I miss my dad was very silly,
mm,
very fun in the life of the party. So it would just be just hanging out with him,
yeah.
just talking, just I mean, not really even having a directive because I think my father was he was my biggest cheerleader. So I already know that that conversation would have already been had. Like, I'm so
Yeah.
proud of you, da da da.
Yeah.
So it just would have been just hanging out with him or having him barbecue, make some ribs, and just sit at the table and just laugh because
I
he
love
was just crazy. So yeah, so yeah, just randomly hanging out with my father. Like, it wouldn't even have to be like a specific conversation.
I love that. My grandmother's my grandmother's I don't know what you call it, but she passed away 10 years ago, and that was on
My
Sunday.
grandmother did too. My grandmother did
Really?
10 years as well. Yeah,
Oh wow. Well,
yeah,
they're obviously here because this was such a nourishing and healing conversation. But when I think
yeah.
about my grandmother, I don't know if I mean, I always said there are so many things that I wish I could ask her because when she passed, I was 23, and I know 23 is an adult, but like I wasn't thinking about the world the way that I'm thinking about it now. And I just feel like she would have so much advice and wisdom that I would be seeking in this moment if she were around. But I also think I used to sleep in my grandmother's bed. My grandmother had I lived in the same house with my grandmother and my mother, and my grandmother had the master bedroom, and she had this like queen size bed, and like, just like very, very, for whatever, the most comfortable bed in the world was my grandmother's bed. And I would always, without fail, in the middle of the night, go into her room and sneak into the bed with her and like wake up there. And like that's what I would want. Like, not even a conversation, but just like
Yeah,
laying in bed with my grandmother would be
that's funny. My
bliss.
nephew does that now with my mother, his grandmother now.
Yeah.
So he always gets in it. She's like, he's always in the bed with me. I said, Mama, let it happen.
Let it happen.
Just
It'll
let
stop
it happen.
eventually, but
It'll
like,
stop eventually, but let it happen,
let it
please.
happen. I love that. Well,
Yeah.
Purvis, this was an amazing conversation. I'm just so grateful to know you now. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
You take care.